Welcome to the Doctors on Social Media podcast. Welcome to SoMeDocs. I'm the founder of this venture, Dr. Donna Coriel, a curious internist turned digital entrepreneur. I run this beautiful community and encourage you all to subscribe, engage, and join us at doctorsonsocialmedia.com. The following is a conversation we had with a professional in healthcare, now available to both watch in video or listen to through audio podcast. We hope it entertains, inspires, and ignites conversation. Don't forget to check out our other unique resources on our website, and of course, share this with your friends. Hi, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of SoMeDocs Conversations. I am so excited to be welcoming across from me virtually Dr. Michael Foti. And if I got the name right, which I think that I did, Dr. Foti, can you please introduce yourself and tell us who you are?
Yes, and thank you so much, Dr. Coriel, for having me. So my name is Dr. Michael Foti. I am a clinical assistant professor of internal medicine at the Toro College of Osteopathic Medicine. So I'm an internal medicine physician and primary care doctor by training. And so happy to be here.
On this episode, we're actually going to be dissecting Dr. Foti's article, which is called A New Journey for Me as a New Board of Director. So I'm actually going to share the screen so that all of you can see it as well. All right, so here we go. We're now sharing the screen. And again, this is the article that you can find on doctorsonsocialmedia.com/magazine. And I'm going to scroll up. I've already read this article, hoping that a lot of you will read the article either before or after you listen to this episode. And I'm going to link it in the show notes so you all have it. And this episode also is going to show up in the article itself. So that's going to be exciting, and people can kind of get to know Dr. Foti in more than just the article that he's written. Okay, now, first question. You write right here, I have always known myself to be a natural born leader. So we want to know, when did you actually know this? There's a lot of, the younger generation that listen to us, and we have a whole student section here. So we all sort of want to know when you first knew that you were a natural born leader, and also if you can give an example of how you knew.
Yeah, definitely. I'll give, a more general and then more specific example, but I think always, from high school up until now, I always I always knew I was meant to lead because I was never afraid to speak up. I was never afraid to speak my mind. That sense of I was never afraid to be vulnerable, right? And no matter the situation, even in high school, I was valedictorian and I wasn't afraid to even, give that type of speech. I had no jitters whatsoever. I was confident and I always knew that I was meant to be in that type of position where I led the room. And I think that was a big part of it. And then another part of it too is that I have I think, a great ability of bringing people together, which I think is phenomenal and an important trait in being a leader. To give an example from my current work, part of what I do here at Toro is I'm a standardized patient program coordinator, and it made me think about my thoughts about being a leader because I've actually I've done several certifications on leadership, but in this role I thought to myself when I first started, how can I expand our standardized patient program here? And for those who may not know, that's basically where standardized patients, which are actors, simulate patient encounters for our students in medical school. And so I brought a team together of our administration, our faculty, and our software developers here at the university, and we are at the final stages of developing a new webpage for our simulation center for the whole university, the tri-campus. And I saw in myself the ability to bring people together. I brought people together from all three campuses, from different departments, and work in that type of interdepartmental coordination, and remain confident in my abilities, but at the same time learn from others at the same time and know whose strengths to bring into what areas of this type of project. And I thought to myself, wow, I know I should be leading. And, in 5 to 10 years, I hope to be leading even on a bigger scale than this.
I love that. And so you almost like foresaw what your future was going to bring. So you write in your article, I witnessed. So fast forward, obviously, to the part where you are a leader and you're sort of practicing in medicine. You specifically talk about the COVID time period, and you write, I witnessed suffering and death on a scale I never thought imaginable. So, can you tell us a little bit and expand more on this?
Of course, yeah. So when the first wave of the COVID-19 pandemic arrived in the US, I was in my intern year of internal medicine at Yale New Haven Greenwich Hospital in Connecticut. And as you can imagine, for an intern, in their first year of training, it's, I mean, obviously the pandemic was a lot for anyone. This was something that was unprecedented for 100 years, but for, an intern, imagine, what kind of we were going through. It's tough to imagine. And what I mean by that is, at that point when the pandemic arrived, yes, I had made those tough calls. I had seen patients suffer. I had seen patients pass away, but the scale and the magnitude of it, how frequent this was occurring, we were, responding to emergencies in the hospital every hour. We were making decisions whether people needed to be put on a ventilator every hour. These were long 12, 16-hour days every day. And also, when I say the magnitude of it, it's also the fact that these were patients that were close to my age. These were these were patients in their 30s and 40s who were suffering from this illness, and it was tough to see on such a magnitude and scale, and how frequently it was occurring day in and day out. So that I think kind of highlights as much as I can the context of what was going on at the time.
Now, did that experience sort of push you into what comes next in the article, which is the manifestation of severe anxiety and depression that you attest to?
It was a big part of it, yes. So around the same time, unfortunately, I also lost my mother, who passed away suddenly. We later found out that she had undiagnosed stage 4 lung cancer, and she passed away within 2 weeks of getting sick. And she was only 54 years old, and it was very difficult. I'd also, lost my father years before that, so it was difficult to lose both my parents already, and being in my early 30s. And so that, combined with working during COVID as an intern, was, I think, definitely a big part of it. When I graduated from residency and became an attending physician, is when a lot of the anxiety manifested. I was waking up every day with an intense fluttering in my chest. I was going to sleep and then being awoken by this intense panic. The worst feeling, I will tell you, I don't wish it on anyone. It was as someone was trying to just rip open my rib cage, squeeze my left arm off. I really felt like I was dying, and then it would just self-resolve. And this happened for months. It would on repeat. And, at first I blamed the job, but I switched jobs and it's continued. And, so I developed a really intense shame. I was embarrassed to look my family in the face, my son and my wife. And I, I had these expectations my entire life of becoming a doctor. I feel like I failed everyone, and especially my mother, who had passed away, and she really didn't get to see me continue to practice. And so eventually it got so bad that I got a really intense panic attack that developed. And really, I thought it was my heart. And I went to the emergency room. All testing was normal. I requested to see a psychiatrist, and was later diagnosed with anxiety and depression. And it's funny, she said to me, she was sitting at my bedside and she asked about myself. And I told her all of this that I'm telling you and your viewers now. And, I was blaming it all again on work. And she looked at me and said, Michael, why are you surprised that this is all happening? Look what you've dealt with in the past 3 years. I mean, this would affect anyone. This is unbelievable. And so I took the next step to get the help that I needed. I saw my primary care doctor and I was started on antidepressant. I was referred to a psychologist, and I put in the work on me. I saw my psychologist week in and week out, tireless hours of work on myself, and eventually I got better.
Wow, what a vulnerable share. So, first of all, kudos to you on your incredible journey and being able to really just rise above it. That's A. B, I'm so, so sorry to hear about both your mom and your dad. That has to be hard. So my
Mm.
condolences go out to you as well for that.
Thank you.
You specifically about this, these manifestations of the anxiety and depression, which sounds like you were diagnosed with, you specifically write that at that time period, you, quote, felt like a failure. I am sure that there's people listening to this that have felt like a failure, which is why, in one point or another, if not multiple times in our lives. So it really makes me feel incredibly thankful to you for putting your voice out there and telling people your honest story. We just don't see a lot, especially of doctors coming out and saying this. And you and I both know, and so does the audience, we both know it doesn't make you a good or bad doctor, whether you've experienced this. If anything, it makes you human. So can you talk about this a little bit, that whole feeling of a failure?
100%. Yeah, it's definitely multifaceted. So, part of it was, I was looking to take care of my family. My wife was working full time before I became an attending. And once I became an attending, she wanted to raise our children herself. And so she, kind of moved over to remote part-time work. And I felt that I failed my family because I couldn't support them. I had to take a medical leave to take care of myself. And I felt like I couldn't support my wife and my son. And I felt terrible for that. I felt like I failed my mom because my entire life, I was, I'm one of two. I have an older brother, and unfortunately, I was always the golden child. He tells me, fortunately for me, I say no, unfortunately for me. But I was always, Michael the doctor before I was ever a doctor for years, my entire life. And so I very much felt like I failed my mom and everyone who ever knew that I was going to be a doctor. And that was tough. It was very tough. But I did a lot of introspection and a lot of the work with a psychologist that I saw, and I realized that one part of it was that I paired my identity with being a doctor. All I saw was being a doctor and forgot everything else about me, right? And how important that was. And that's why I tell everyone that what we do is what we do. It's not who we are, right? There's so much more to us than our profession. And you need to nourish that part of yourself outside of your profession because then you really bring that uniqueness and distinctiveness about yourself back to your patients anyway, right? Whether it's art, poetry, writing, music, sports, whatever it is, right? You're a unique individual more than what you do, right? And another part of this, and you talked about being human, right? And I love that because another part of why I developed a lot of this shame was the stigma of mental health, right? Where doctors for years and decades really have perpetuated this culture of medicine where we're afraid to speak up because we just have to push through, right? And we forget that doctor or not, we're human beings. And if you experience what I experienced and then the consequences of that being anxiety and depression, that's just part of the human experience. And the only way we can normalize this being the human experience is by speaking up, right? And that's what I'll always continue to do.
Yeah, I mean, we're almost not allowed to break down. You're not allowed to be human when you're a doctor, when you sort of go into it. Some of it you said actually, specifically the part about saying that you have to really just look at it like a job and remember that you're so much more than that job. It reminds me a little bit of our colleague, Dr. Louis Profeta, who I'm going to shout out here, and I'll definitely tag him in the show notes, so that we can kind of read some of his work with SoMeDocs. He published a few articles. He also appeared in one of our episodes of Conversations with Shem.
We need to quit propping up medicine as being our identity. My identity as a father, as a husband, as a spouse, and a friend. What I do for a living, just like Eric said, is a doctor. It is the most liberating thing in the world to say to yourself that it's just a job.
Dr. Profeta says a similar thing in our show called Doctors on Walks Getting Food. Take a listen.
Well, I think that you can't be happy in your job because I think we take it too personal. Okay? We've been sold this bill of goods. Somehow you got to be compassionate and empathetic to be a good doctor. It's bullshit. It's absolute bullshit. Patients don't care. They don't know the difference. Okay? And all you got to do is do your job. And if you do your job like you're supposed to do, you'll come off as empathetic and compassionate. But you don't have to feel it. You don't have to internalize it. Okay? And for some reason, we're being made to feel that somehow we have to have this horse whisperer kind of, intuitiveness with patients, and there's got to be some sort of spiritual connection. It's all bullshit. Okay, it's just do your job, provide good care, even the days where you don't feel like being there.
But I think that some of us do need to sometimes remind ourselves that it is our job, right? I mean, maybe it's not just a job, but it is our job, and there's so much more that's dependent on us, and that is important to us outside of these. For you, clearly, it's not limited to, but it's certainly being a husband and possibly being a father, etc. And that must be such a big burden on your shoulders, and it must have been a big burden on your shoulders, right? To be sort of the family breadwinner all of a sudden, and to also have just undergone through the sudden death of your mother, and everything is suddenly probably like closing in on you, where you really just physically can't breathe.
100%. I mean, that's exactly how I would describe it. At my lowest point, was hiding away in my basement day in and day out because I was too afraid to even look them in the face. I was too embarrassed to look them in the face.
We'll be right back. Our Neurodiversity Conference is a conference about people who think differently. Take a listen to our lineup.
Hey, it's Crystal, and I am so excited to be chairing this conference for and about neurodiverse physicians. We're going to talk about some of the different neurodiversities and how they can or potentially can impact your treatment plan.
My presentation will be on sleep strategies for neurodivergent physicians. We'll talk about how the unique gifts and challenges affect sleep.
And I'm excited to share about mindfulness, how to quiet the chatter in your mind and feel more calm and present.
Having a different brain predisposes you to problems and changes some of our novel treatments. In my lecture, you'll learn what those treatment options are, how they differ in people with neurodiversity, and how we can differentiate burnout from actual psychiatric illness.
Whether you have ADHD or not, you can join my class to learn how to optimize your executive function and end procrastination loops.
There are a lot of people out there who are on the spectrum but don't know it. They know they're different, but they don't understand why. And that's what I'm going to be discussing with you.
It's important to remember that this concept of normal or neurotypical is not a value judgment. It's just the most common type of brain, so that's the kind of brain that society is structured around.
To better recognize and support your colleagues who may have ADHD, and that includes yourself as well as perhaps people that you're leading if you're a physician leader.
You can catch this event live for free or access the footage after it's over anytime by purchasing a ticket on our website at doctorsonsocialmedia.com/conferences. Now back to the show.
At my lowest point, was hiding away in my basement day in and day out because I was too afraid to even look them in the face. I was too embarrassed to look them in the face. I can remember, and I'm trying not to get too emotional here, but I can remember my son, being upstairs crying for me, and I can hear him, daddy, daddy, and I was afraid to even, I was afraid to even go upstairs and be with them because I was so ashamed. And I'm in a much better place now, thankfully, because as you mentioned, yep, I'm a husband, I'm a father, and I'm so much more than this profession. Not that I don't love this profession, because I do, and it's so rewarding, but who knows one day whatever could happen in my profession, but I'm more than that. And so I have to remember that.
You're so much more than that. And there's absolutely no shame in crying. In fact, the last physician that I interviewed cried as well. So I think that if anything, it reminds our listeners that we are human. It's something that we keep trying to do as physicians, as healthcare is just more and more broken. And we're trying to kind of tread above water and to remind everyone that we are human. If it takes for us to cry and to show everyone that we're human, then that's fine by me too, because I regularly cry. I'll share that as well. So I appreciate, you being honest and your vulnerability here. It's not easy to do for those listening. So definitely appreciate any support that you can give. Definitely for the doctors like him that really open up and share vulnerably to really, I think more than anything, and I'm actually going to ask you why you're sharing, but I would think that you're doing it because you want others to hear that it's okay, that others also have a hard time and we cry and you can get over it and it's okay to ask for help. Is that an accurate message of what you're trying to say? And if so, what else, what are the reasons for you sharing?
That's first and foremost the reason is why I first started sharing, because I know medical students, residents, attending physicians, I know there's people out there suffering in silence because I did. So I know that that's a fact. And so I want to empower those who are suffering in silence to feel okay to get the help that they need. My first talk was here at Toro actually, and I was felt with such a wonderful response back from my students that I never would have thought. It was so positive. One of my students even came and gave me a hug. He was so nice, and it was met with such positivity, and it's just been a snowball effect of all these speaking platforms, and I've had people reach out, students reach out, faculty, staff to speak to me because they now feel empowered to get the help that they need. And it's exactly why I do it. This is completely altruistic on my end. And I'm hoping to not only empower those to get the help they need, but I hope that even if I'm a very, very tiny part of it, I hope to play a role in the shift of the culture of medicine for the better.
Oh, amazing. Your words are so powerful. I think that you also, just from an outside perspective, if I may, you exude empathy. That's what I'm sort of feeling when you share your story. You're doing it in a very soft way that really makes one like really feel for you. So I think that empathy allows everyone to connect with you. I think that that's going to obviously also help you with patients because that's really what patients dream about. I mean, me as a patient, I'm sure it sounds like you've been a patient too, right?
Mhm.
We've encountered all sorts of different personalities when we get care, and I think getting care from someone that it's just empathetic. And again, it just sucks that healthcare is broken and sometimes we're not as empathetic because we're so burnt out and tired. I just wish that we could, like, there was like a magic fix to this system that you and I are both practicing in and patients in.
I know. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
going to take all of us.
It is 100%. So I mean, we've answered some of this already, but I still want to get your view. Do you think that you're unique well, obviously not. We talked about that. You write, quote, eventually, I must have the courage to get the help I must have the courage to get the help I needed. So can you tell us what that help was? Okay, we got to that and you don't have, okay. Sorry, you actually went through your story and you answered some of these questions, which is amazing.
Sorry, my apologies.
No, it's amazing. Um, okay. So you write about getting invited to the National Academy of Medicine to speak alongside the US Surgeon General. So we want to hear about that. Can you tell us how that came about?
Yes, of course. Thank you. So there's an initiative, there's an action collaborative actually that the U.S. Surgeon General is a part of, as well as the National Academy of Medicine. It's called the Health Workforce Wellbeing Action Collaborative. And part of that is the Dr. Lorna Breen Provider Protection Act. And for those who may not know, Dr. Lorna Breen was an emergency medicine physician who unfortunately took her life during the COVID-19 pandemic. And they've now developed this act in her honor, the Provider Protection Act, that is going to award hospital systems, healthcare facilities with grants to start a campaign for mental health and resources for mental health, increased resources for the health workforce. And so to kick this off, there was an event in Washington, D.C., and the National Academy of Medicine reached out to all of the associations, all the medical associations, one of them being ACOM, or the American Association of Colleges of Osteopathic Medicine. And the president reached out to all the deans of the colleges of osteopathic medicine. And our dean here, Dr. Ken Steyer, put my name because he knew that I was a mental health advocate. So Dr. Kane, who's the ACOM president, submitted my name. One thing led to another, and they, loved my story, and I got to speak at such a really important event, and it was really wonderful. And the U.S. Surgeon General was so kind and appreciative of me speaking there.
What an incredible opportunity. Where was that? Was it virtual?
Washington, D.C.
Oh,
But
wow.
I was virtual as well as the Surgeon General. Some people were also there in D.C. But it's tough for me to get away right now with everything. But yeah, I spoke virtually.
course. So, what's your ultimate goal? I mean, it sounds from the article like you really want to kind of address that stigma. But is there are there other ultimate goals?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping to continue to speak up and share my story, and continue to empower others as much as I can. Now, if this leads hopefully to some sort of leadership position where I can help enact change on that front, I'm all for it, 100%. So I'm hoping my voice gets louder and heard by more, so I can get into that type of leadership position. I mean, I'd love to move up, over the next 5 to 10 years into a position where I can affect that type of change.
Amazing. And actually, this leads to the last and not least important question, and that's quoting you. This path led to my nomination for a position as a member of the board of directors for the New York State Osteopathic Medical Society, of which I was voted in and approved this past April. So I love happy endings. This article had a happy ending for you. Can you talk about that happiness and what's happening to you now that is causing you, to be in a better place?
We'll be back. Did you know that we have multiple series already available to watch or listen to inside of our series section? Check out the second season of Conversations with Shem, starring as host the legendary author of The House of God himself, Dr. Samuel Shem.
I've watched you unfold too in your writing.
I know it's a terrible burden and you'll get shat on, but we'll have a good time.
Yeah. If we answer that question and the answer is yes, we value money, then we're doing everything just right now.
Oh, because the food is really good, that the hospital's really good.
Healthcare workers have been always stressed, but of course, above and beyond.
At this age.
To learn.
Yes, the disparities still exist.
People in the C-suite, the corporate people, they don't care. To them, doctors are just employees.
And that's what people have really responded to, the authenticity.
All I really wanted was to come to work and feel like I was rowing in the same direction as everybody else.
Like, you could be a doctor, you could be someone who works in a parking lot for the hospital.
It is not uncommon for people to put aside their personal life.
I could never speak like that.
But we are not listening to the why.
How are you working to co-produce solutions?
And he said, all well and good, Dr. Vonnegut, but if the dollars work, nothing else matters.
When I started medical school, I was the only person who looked like me in my medical school class.
Something about the struggles of men and friendship sort of as they age.
And people hate it when I say this, like, you're just scaring me. I can't do anything about this.
And I had my threadbare blue blazer, and they all had these $1,000 suits.
Tearing something down in order to get to what's real and important.
Because we had to march across the bridge, one of the biggest marches ever.
They would only pay me half of what they were paying me now.
But it's true, I tell you or not.
No, you don't have any choice.
I need to promise you that it's not over.
I called my wife and said, I need new clothes.
Good connection is good medicine. That's the one phrase I've come up in my 76th year, I think.
It's all on doctorsonsocialmedia.com/series. Now back to our show.
Can you talk about that happiness and what's happening to you now that is causing you, to be in a better place?
Yeah. So just to address that, yeah, I mean, I think that was a really one of the high points of my career, where I was recognized for the work that I've been doing, by my peers and was nominated onto the board of the New York State Osteopathic Medical Society, which I'll serve for the next 2 years at least, if not hopefully more so. And that's the medical society for the entire state of New York, and I'm just honored. Really, it was to be recognized. And a big other part of my happiness is just being here and having such a wonderful position, rewarding position to train the next generation of doctors. And my students are so appreciative. I have something here. You can see the sign over here, but it says Cafe Foti. So it's something that I developed in my office where I have a coffee machine, I have snacks, and I provide, all of this to my students, just to give them like a safe haven to sit here and, talk about their career advice or about their, the courses they're doing, anything. And, they were so appreciative. They got me this sign, which was like, that warms my heart. So it's definitely become one of the mainstays here of Toro is Cafe Foti. But so I'd say my students, my position here, and other leadership positions that I'm getting, such as, on the New York State Osteopathic Medical Society. I'm also a board of director for the National Alliance on Mental Illness here in Orange County, New York. And I'm a national faculty member for the MBOME. So it's been great, and I'm learning so much from my peers, and it's getting better every day.
That is so amazing. I'm actually inspired to throw a challenge out to our listeners. Let's do a hashtag challenge. Let's do hashtag SoMeDocs Foti and go along with that whole theme of the cafe. Maybe like share something that really touched you the most out of this interview. And so to everyone out there, the challenge in this episode is SoMeDocs Foti challenge. So if you do throw it out there to social media, don't forget to use that hashtag so that we can look that up. If anyone ever uses it, we can always look that up. But just one, it'll be hard to find just one inspirational thing that you've said during this episode, but what a cool idea that Foti Cafe is just
Yeah.
amazing. And we only see half of it, but I see the sign. And I also see the snacks.
Yes, yes. The
I
snacks, the
love that.
coffee, it's all here.
So students actually come and they take you up on it?
Oh, 100%. And honestly, sometimes it's just to sit and talk. It's not even for the coffee. It started as coffee, but they just love coming in and chatting about, like I said, they asked me about my career and like advice for them about, a lot of the second years are studying for their board exams. So, asking me about that. And it's very much become a safe haven for them, and they love it, and they're just so appreciative. So
I love
it's been
it.
great. It's been great.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I not only love it, but there's another kind of like sixth degree of Kevin Bacon connection. And that's, we talked about her earlier, but student Amanda Kane, who is pre-medical and starting Torah Medical School shortly, but it reminds me a little bit of that as well, because I just interviewed her on her article, and she too, she spoke about different struggles than you, but she also was like very vulnerably shares some of the struggles that she went through as a, like, I guess she finished schooling earlier. Like she finished high school at 16, she finished college at 18, but which to us sounds like Doogie Howser and just sounds incredible. And we're like, wow, how cool. And we only think good thoughts, but we don't think about how hard it is for the actual students. So she vulnerably shares about how lonely it always was. And she says, because she was the youngest. And so people didn't necessarily want to be her friend. And it just felt, you can really like feel her struggle. So so that's interesting because it's a different struggle, but she also kind of puts it out there and vulnerably shares because she wants to help us to like extinguish the burnout. But you sort of have a different viewpoint and different experiences that caused, you to have a difficult time. So
Yeah.
do you feel like a new person now?
Yeah. 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 I mean, like every day's better than the last. It's really been phenomenal. And even, to add another positive note to this happy ending, I've written a book about all these experiences as well, that'll be coming out later this week. And it started as something very much therapeutic. I was just getting it down on paper, and it turned into something that I said, hey, I can reach even more people with this. And if I can empower even just another person with this book, then it's
Amazing.
worth it.
What is the name of the book?
So it's titled Grief,
Okay.
and the subtitle being A Doctor's Battle with Anxiety and Depression.
Amazing. And is going to be on Amazon and everything?
It's going to be on Amazon by the end of the week, yeah.
So I am going to throw out there, Dr. Foti, that if you'd like, I will comp a book page for you on SoMeDocs. I'll build that for you. If you have any interest whatsoever, we could do that offline, but happy to build a book page we have a directory that's an outside exam rooms directory, and in it, there's a books section.
Yeah.
You usually have to be that level member, but I would be happy to comp that for you and sort of showcase that book because it sounds like it might help a lot of people.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Of course, of course. So, in closing, Is there anything that you'd like to leave the audience with, or maybe if you have an ask, maybe it's, please purchase my book, which we'll of course also include in the show notes additionally. But is there any particular ask that you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, of course, I'd love everyone to get my book because I think it's a powerful message. But my ask is please take care of yourselves. Please. It's, no profession is more important than your mental health. And there is no health without mental health. So I do all this just to help as many people as I can because I saw the darkness and I don't want anyone to be in that darkness. And I want everyone to be in the light, which is where I'm at right now. And so, yeah, that's my only most important ask.
Amazing. Such a positive ending. And so thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it. And if you're listening to this or watching it and you really have been touched, not only should you go and engage in our SoMeDocs Foti challenge, but you should also share this with your peers or with your family and friends and ask them to listen. We appreciate all of our listeners. And thank you so much, Dr. Foti, for taking the time to share your story.
Thank you, Dr. Coriel. A pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for listening.